introduce Kevin Burton, the head coach of the Union College Kentucky men's basketball program. Coach, welcome.
Thanks, Coach Smith. Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yep, I can hear you. I can hear
Yes.
you.
Okay.
Now for the coaches that aren't familiar with you, I did send out Chris Oliver's podcast to the coaches that were on the email, so some of them are going to be familiar with your ideas. But the first thing I think I'd like to hear from you is maybe the evolution of your philosophy, your subbing philosophy, your every possession counts equal philosophy, and how that's evolved over your coaching career.
Are you the podcast that my son fell asleep in 5 minutes into listening to? Is that the one you were talking about?
I thought it was fabulous.
It excited him so much.
I've listened to it like 6 times, to be honest with you.
By the way, I think I'm saying this right. The 1983 NCAA championship was won by USC Lady Trojans. Is that right?
That is correct. With the McGee twins.
In Lexington, Kentucky. I grew up about 12 miles from Rupp Arena, from where they won
wow.
it. And that was I think that was either the first or second women's basketball game that I ever saw live.
Oh, wow.
So that was just a brand new thing to me, of course. Of course, I got to meet Cheryl Miller, who I was convinced was the greatest female player I'd ever seen, and might still be. I don't know. If she's not, she's way up there.
Wait, who's this? I didn't hear. Who did you mention?
Cheryl Miller.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. She's pretty awesome.
So she was pretty phenomenal. But Coach Smith, back to your point. And is anybody listening to this with the NBA playoffs going on right now?
We all are.
Oh yeah, there's plenty of people on.
Okay. Well, as far as the point you brought up, in my younger coaching career, I was trying to figure out how to truly evaluate my players' performances, and I didn't find that the stat sheet told me enough. I was brought up like a lot of people. I'd read the stats, and if a guy had so many points, so many rebounds, I thought he played good or bad, and I realized pretty quickly that really wasn't telling the story of what was going on in the game. One of the things that happened is I read a newspaper article about my team about the headline was such and such player leads the team to victory. And I thought he played very poorly. And the only reason why they put the headline like that is because he had scored the most points. And this was before the software programs came out to grade and evaluate players, things of that nature. So I just sort of started watching each possession in live play and sort of making notes on each possession of what I thought players were doing and see if I could see any kind of consistent behavior from each player, like missing a screen or always hitting a screen, or his pass was on time or his passes weren't on time or not on time, things of that nature. And in doing so, then that sort of spilled into grading or evaluating their play based on, did they do what they were supposed to do in that possession? On offense, maybe were they spaced properly or were they spaced incorrectly, which created us not to be able to get the shot off, things of that nature. So I started holding players accountable based on that. It really wasn't very scientific. It was just simply going down each possession and handwriting notes. And then I would go back and just count up how many pluses a guy had, how many minuses a guy had. And I came up with my own plus minus ratio, other than what the scoreboard read. And then I started noticing that over time, the more effective players, or you could tell who the more effective players were by how many pluses they were getting, or versus how many minuses they were getting. And then I noticed the guys had the most pluses, and this is steering away from just scoring points now. When the players that had all the pluses were on the floor the most, we were doing better. So then I started realizing that a guy could go 1 for 3 from the field and maybe be a more effective player than the guy that goes, 5 for 7 and doesn't get back on defense and doesn't box out and ends up costing you more points than he gave you, or that he was responsible for, should I say. So in doing so, we just started putting a greater value on playing correctly and playing between shot attempts. Are you playing the right way? Are you helping us between shot attempts? Of course, we want them to help us during shot attempts as well. But we want them to, if you all have ever noticed a player when he misses a shot or when she misses a shot, they slap their hands in anger and they trot back on D. And so my question to my players is, so why don't you do that when you don't get a closeout the right way, or when you don't exactly land a screen the right way, And the reason why is because they've been brought up, like all of us were, to value scoring points more than any other factor in the game. Which, again, we need them to score points, but we would like for them to start considering the things they don't lay around dreaming about on a higher scale than they currently do. So that's why during practices in our live play, I'll go back and grade the video, and the next day I'll let them know, how well or poorly they had done based on, how we graded it on their effectiveness. So, for instance, an example defensively, if we were trying to choke a ball reversal at the top of the key because they're running a misdirection play and we knew the ball reversal play or the ball reversal pass was going to eventually end up in a post feed for a score, and the player choked the reversal properly and they couldn't get the ball over to the wing, to us, that's the same as scoring a bucket. If we end up getting a stop on that play, we will grade that player very high, that he essentially helped us eliminate a score on the other end. And so we'll value his performance on that possession as such. If he boxes out if a little, maybe it doesn't have to be a little guy, but another example, if a small guy were to block out someone and allow a free player on our team to jump up and grab the rebound, even though he doesn't get credit for that rebound, we give him credit for it on a positive note, because for not allowing the opponent to grab that rebound. I don't know if I'm making any sense or not, but do you follow where I'm going with that?
Yeah, absolutely. The question I have real quick is how to quantify, and I have some clips of your team that we can go through if you want to.
Oh, Lord.
If you want to, how to quantify your plus and minuses. Are you getting just a straight plus, or is it a straight minus, or is it an actual integer number?
So that's a great question. That's the question that I've been asked about 1 million times.
Yeah.
And I've softened my scoring system slightly, but essentially, if it is helping eliminate a 3-point shot from the other team, I could value it as 3. If it's a 2-pointer, then I could value it as 2. But even more importantly than quantifying it with a number, in my opinion, if you just to figure out who your top 2 players or 7 players or 9 players on your team, if you just simply went down and did plus minus on the possessions, that will start telling a story. That in itself. I don't know that there is an exact correct way to quantify it. That's why the software systems that I've been introduced to, I've often wondered, I just can't make myself purchase one. Number one, because we don't have the money, because we're a small little poor college. Number two, on each possession, we may be guarding differently. We may, if they're spacing us out, we may be shrinking the court and pack lining it. If we're playing our normal man-to-man style defense, we may be denying one pass away. And I don't understand if a software system understands that on each possession. So how can it know how to grade us? Same thing offensively. If we land a back screen, and we don't deliver the pass, and we should have, and then we end up coming up empty 8 seconds later, we miss a shot. The passer, in my opinion, on that possession should be given a negative score for that possession, because he's the one that I would hold the most responsible for not doing as he should have. So in that instance, you could do a -2 type of thing.
Yeah. Now, does the screener and the cutter, do they still get positive scores even though there was no bucket on the possession?
That you're the first person that's actually asked that question. I've been fearing that question. So what I've done in the past is I have noted, on the side in the tab, I'll put 0 down, meaning we didn't score, but I will put a plus down and do in my little shorthand screen or cut, and I will let myself know they did the right thing, if that makes any sense. So in one possession, I will make a note that they should have received a plus even though we didn't score.
Right. And then conversely, you could switch it on defense. If they blow it and they have a wide open catch and shoot 3, but they miss, it's going to be a 0.
Absolutely.
So they're not getting dinged.
100%. So
yeah.
we have finished very high statistically in 3-point percentage defense. I didn't even realize this until recently, and somebody asked me why we were so good at defending threes, and I didn't realize we were. But the guys that are the players that are sort of limited that we play against that are just catch and shoot guys, which is kind of what I was a long time ago. I remember there was a certain value early in the game of getting open and getting to shoot a shot. Even if I missed it, it helped me catch a rhythm, as opposed to not getting a clean look off until, 12 or 15 minutes into the game, So, and where I'm going with this is if we do blow it and let that 42% 3-point shooter that 70% of his field goal makes are threes, if we blow it and we give him 2 wide open threes and he misses them, but he catches a rhythm and then later on he starts making them, again, I don't know how to quantify this exactly, but I can hold those players accountable potentially for him making that 3rd or 4th 3 by allowing him to get so open, on mistakes that happened early. And so we really focus in on the whole game, but especially early on, of not allowing those players to get open shots, to make them put the ball on the floor, to take them out of the screening actions that they're used to getting open in, that kind of thing.
It's a very interesting way to look at it. Now, can you speak a little bit on your subbing patterns? And I know that was a big deal that Chris Oliver was asking you about. But just for the coaches that aren't familiar with you and your ideas, can you just talk a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, and then Chris was complaining because politely complaining that he had watched a couple games and didn't see me sub a lot. And then I told him, well, yeah, because we weren't very good. I didn't want to put anybody else in the game. But where that stems from, and that's the other thing, I actually years ago didn't even realize how much we were subbing until it kept being brought up to me. People kept bringing it up. You sub more than anybody I've ever seen, And I was just like, really? We do? And it seemed like every dead ball we had, multiple players going to the bench. And I guess where that stems from is I quickly understood and realized how important every possession was, not just the last few of the game, which is what everybody seems to remember. And I just told our coaches, if we're going to explain to our players that they got to value every possession, we need to coach the same way. And so my question to my coaches, this is years ago now, is if after a made free throw, a lot of times we like to pick up and press full court, or maybe early in the game to see if the other teams can handle, that kind of pressure. If I know 2 of the 5 players are not very good at that style of defense, even though they were quote unquote starters, then why in the world would I keep them in the game? If I had other players on the team that were just better than them at that. And so, so in press D, I would always try to have our 5 best in press D, and press O the same way. Baseline out of bounds D, we do a specific style of guarding out of bounds. We used to trap out of bounds. We don't do that nearly as much anymore. And so the players that ended up showing us that they were the best at that, we would always try to have them in the game. Now, of course, there's some balance with all of that, on, how good he's playing that night, and the exact specific situation of the game. But essentially, we try to put because there's no dead balls are not guaranteed, and free play up and down the court's not guaranteed. The only thing's guaranteed is that very next possession if it's a dead ball. So we want to take the one thing that's guaranteed and make sure we play it to the best of our ability by having the most correct personnel in the game at the time. So in baseline out of bounds D, for instance, we would, like every other thing, we would grade them and watch them over a period of time, and the ones that were that rated the 5 best, we would try to make sure those guys were in. Now, hopefully, the hope is that you have 9, 10, 11, 12 guys that grade so high that it doesn't matter. But if it doesn't end up working out that way, then obviously we want to have the best we can on the floor. And in some years, we've had that. We've had 8 to 12 guys that grade very, very similar in a similar fashion in a certain aspect. In other years, we haven't. So it just depends on year to year. And I'm sure it's at any level, but at small college level, it's probably more volatile for us than Coach Cronin or Coach Cal. We can't we don't quite line up the same level of talent all the time.
Now, quick question, and there's some people in the chat are asking. Yes, absolutely. Everybody's welcome to ask questions. I'll ask one real quick, and then we'll open it up if anyone else wants to ask
Sure.
one. But Coach, is it specific enough to where if you're running, say, Chicago baseline out of bounds, that you want the best 5 that run that exact baseline out of bounds play, or are you just putting in your best baseline team? In other words, how specific are you getting? In other words,
the probably if I look out there and I know that this particular grouping of players executes a certain set, I may call that out. But in my mind, if I know I want to call some set that gets a post up, then I might sub 2 or 3 players in, maybe the best post speed guy I've got, maybe the best deep post up player that receives the ball and scores it. I may run them in immediately, no matter how many fouls I have, no matter what's going on, I'll put them in. So to answer your question, yes, it just depends. Sometimes I can call a set out based on who's already out there.
Yeah.
I may have already subbed some people out due to fatigue and don't want to put them right back in. But if fatigue's not an issue, if they've come out for 2 seconds, I'll put them right back in without even any hesitation whatsoever. And people have asked me, they've asked me in a curious way, it looks like you're offensive and defensive subbing at the beginning of the game and in the first half. And my response was, so nobody else is doing that? Because to me, if you look at our scores, so many of our games, not just ours, but come down to just a couple baskets, a couple possessions. And we just want to try to feel like we've maximized every possession in a strategic standpoint from a coaching, perspective. And we fail at that, of course. We look back on situations over the years and and realized that we, maybe overdid it a little bit in this case or that case. But essentially we don't hesitate on putting in people. We don't, and in our program, we don't even talk about starters. Half the time, I don't know who starts our games. I don't really even, I guess I care, but I don't hold it to that high of a regard. Because we need hopefully 9, 10, 12 guys helping us. Some years it's the last couple of years we've not been as deep, so it's been 7 or 8. But we go, at least I go into the game just thinking of those grouping of players instead of a starting lineup and all that kind of stuff. We just don't really get into that.
So you're playing for the next possession. So then
absolutely.
So then if let's just put a hypothetical and say there's 2 minutes left in the game and you're up 4 and you have the ball coming out sideline out of bounds. You're up 4, 2 minutes left. Are you putting in your best offensive team for that one possession, or are you playing, just in case there's not another dead ball, putting in some defensive players?
No, I'm gonna put in who I think is going to help us score. Now, again, hopefully that best
one possession.
Correct.
Interesting.
And hopefully that best offensive grouping is also the best defensive grouping, So I ask my players a trick question at the beginning of this every preseason before we start playing games. What's more important, offense or defense? And they all say defense. And I start laughing at them. And I said, well, if that's true, how come when you all come in the gym, I don't see you working on your defensive slides or your closeouts? All you do is jack up threes, And so I let them know that I firmly believe that they're both as equally as important. That's just my opinion. And that it's really hard to win at a national level if you're only good at one of those things. You better be good at both of them. And so hopefully those good offensive players are also the top defenders. But to answer your question, I would put in a better offensive player in the scenario you gave to score that bucket. We had a player a few years ago. I shouldn't say his name. He was as athletic vertically as anybody I've ever laid eyes on. He jumped over top of a guy's head like Vince Carter did and dunked one. Now, he couldn't play a lick, though. He was not a very good player. A good guy. I tried like heck to help him develop and get it in. And he could be sitting over on the bench cold for 45 minutes. I could sub him in on a side out of bounds play or a base out of bounds play for an alley-oop. He could just jump up like no problem whatsoever and dunk it. He was so bad defensively that as he was dunking the ball, I was screaming timeout to sub him out. So to your point, yes, I would sub somebody in for a bucket because that in my mind that could be the game and our season because we've won our conference regular season championship on the final day more than one time. And of course, as we all know, we look back and see how many one possession games we won or lost, and it can come down to that.
That's fascinating. Now, Coach, looking through your history, have you ever? It doesn't look like you've ever been an assistant coach. Is that right? You've always been a head coach?
For 5 years. I was at Asbury University as an assistant.
Okay.
And then for some reason, when I was 26 years old, St. Catherine College, which was a junior college, hired me as their head coach. And I looked like I was about 17. My first game of my coaching career as a head coach, we're playing Three Rivers Community College in Missouri in the Black River Coliseum against Gene Best, who's the all-time NJC leader in wins. And I'm all pumped up, ready for my 7-minute pregame speech to my players. And we get to the arena, and the safety officer came up to me and asked me, "Son, where's your head coach?" So I gave him the keys to your locker room. And all of my players thought that was pretty funny because at the time I looked very young. And but the point is, I got thrown into it pretty quickly, and I learned through a lot of failure. I mean, a lot of failure. It was. I thought I had all the answers, and through a season and a half of my head coaching career, I had a losing record. And I remember thinking, this ain't as easy as I thought it was going to be. I better start figuring some things out here. So I would go on these different quests of best zone O, best press D, best ideas of rebound, and it was just an interesting time period for my coaching career.
That's fascinating. I love hearing about how different philosophies evolve and just how your thought just processed throughout your career. Now you've been a head coach then for going on 17 seasons, 15, 16,
well, let's
17?
see here, 4, 11, 18 or 19. I haven't even 18 or 19 maybe?
18 or 19. Okay.
Yeah.
So at what point did you kind of throw out the traditional sit a guy with 2 fouls in the first half? When did that go out?
Well, I remember when I was a player, I wasn't very good. I was that guy that was just good enough to get you beat. That was who I was on the team. But I led my team in minutes played. And when my coach took me out because I picked up a certain number of fouls, I had a very difficult time dealing with that emotionally and mentally because I thought I could play and be just as effective with no matter how many fouls I had. And I always knew I wanted to coach, and I just remember always saying that I was never going to do that. Now never is a strong word, but so I would say I had the idea along, even in my playing days, but really, people have made a really big deal about us playing people with fouls, and they call it gambling. And I just don't see it that way. I just don't think it's gambling at all. I think it's gambling if you don't have your best players on the floor. Now I get it as far as if a player's behavior is such a way that he's just not understanding and he's fouling, then I could understand why you should take him out and speak with him on, your hands are doing this or your feet are doing that. I understand that part, but just for the sake of having it as a philosophy, for me, just me now, I struggle with that because I feel like if you do the 2 foul thing, that when players pick up their first foul in the first half, they're going to become much less aggressive just for the sake of making sure they got to play rather than playing winning basketball. And a few years ago, I have a kid named Fitzgerald White. He's playing professionally in Spain, very good player, 6'7" wing. He was having a really big offensive night, probably his best offensive half of his career for us. Everybody else was having the opposite type of night. Anyway, long story short, he picks up his second foul, and I leave him in first half. He picks up his third foul. Their bench erupted because they were so excited they knew he was coming out. It was like about 6 or 7 minutes ago in the half, and I left him in with 3 fouls. He goes on and scores a few more points. And I had a sub at the scorer's table to take him out with like 50 seconds to go in the half, and he picks up his 4th foul in charge. So of course I was not happy with that, but we ended up winning the game by I think 5 points, and there's no question in my mind had I taken him out because he picked up his 3rd foul in the first half, we probably wouldn't have won the game. We were limited that night in personnel with some injuries and things of that nature, but I've had the advantage of being at a small college, so at the end of the game, I don't get ridiculed by media, if it doesn't work, because sometimes it backfires and doesn't work. The majority of the time, it has been very, very beneficial for us. Of course, the disadvantage is the guys at UCLA, not you, of course, but they get bigger paychecks than me. So I guess there's advantages and disadvantages, but if you just count if I ask any coach your top 3 players, or if you knew they were going to, if I could guarantee you they were going to play 18 more possessions, and you play them with and not worry about how much foul trouble they were in, versus taking them out and putting doing the traditional substitution pattern of fouls, would you rather have them in for those extra 18 possessions? And my point is you're gonna have a better chance of winning if you keep them in the most the higher number of possessions, whether or not where that comes in the game, whether it's last 3 minutes, first 3 minutes, middle 12 minutes, whatever it happens to be. I don't think that should determine when you take a player out, but that's just my opinion. I feel like I feel like over time it's been proven by us that you're going to get more out of your best players and more possessions. Therefore, you're going to have a better chance of winning by playing them with with a number of fouls.
Now, have you found when you're facing a fifth foul that teams going after that player instead of running their normal offense? Do you find that that's kind of a wash? That
so I have noticed that a few times. I've been surprised it has not happened as much. So I have not noticed that as much, to answer your question. But we were playing in the national championship game a few years ago, and I had I think 3 of my top players with four fouls. One of my first team All-Americans picked up his 4th foul with 11 minutes to go. And the next possession, we had the ball baseline out of bounds, and I put him back in. And, of course, the ESPN broadcasters are raking me over the coals, saying, well, he must not be aware he's got 4 fouls, And he hit a 3-pointer and got fouled on it, so he got an and 1-3 that very next possession. Of course, while he's shooting a free throw, I'm subbing him out. So I'm doing offensive, defensive subs for him from the 11-minute mark on. And I had 2 more players pick up their 4th fouls with 7 to 8 minutes to go in the game. And I did the same thing with them throughout the entire game. They thought it was the craziest thing they'd ever seen, that I was playing 3 players with 4 fouls with 7 minutes to go in the ball game. And we win the game by 1 possession. We won the game by 3. And I think it's fair to say we probably wouldn't have won the game had I played some inferior talent.
Yeah, I think it's a very fascinating philosophy, and I've read other blogs on it. Kim Palm has done a study on sitting players with fouls and playing players with fouls, and I think mathematically it bears it out that you're at a disadvantage if you just sit them. You're at a, like you say, like if you just play them and accept the fate and take your higher efficiency with those players in the game, that especially if you're valuing the next possession as equal,
right.
That the numbers are going to bear it out. Now, you make a good point that, when you're facing media scrutiny, when you've got boosters to answer to, there's a lot of other factors that come into play there for some coaches.
So at my previous institution, I actually would, in an evolving way, I started educating my boosters on this factor. And I told them, because they were all big University of Tennessee fans, I said, I want you to count how many possessions, they get to play once they pick up their 2nd foul in the first half, which is going to be 0, of course. And then how many possessions they get to play after their 4th foul for the rest of the game. And then next time we have a guy with 4 fouls, I want you to count how many possessions he gets to play. And then by the 3rd or 4th time, they all actually charted out themselves. They were all believers. So, so they all thought it was good, and they all thought everybody else was an idiot for doing it the other way. And I was like, well, no, they're not. That's just their philosophy. It doesn't mean that we're necessarily smart. It just kind of works for us. So we'll just look at it that way.
And I found it very fascinating that you willingly engage with fans and people after your games, just about all kinds of stuff. Go ahead
Absolutely.
And speak on that. That's awesome. And scary.
Well, yeah. So at my previous institution, this guy was one of my season ticket holders was on me about playing somebody or not playing somebody or whatever. So after the game, I said, "Hey man, what in the world were you talking about?" And I kind of embarrassed him. He was surprised that I approached him. I wasn't mad at him. I was just curious. And so he told me, I was like, "I tell you what time do you go to work tomorrow?" He said, I was like, "Meet me at Cracker Barrel at 7:30. I'll buy you breakfast. Let's talk about it. I want to hear your ideas." And so he was blown away by it. He couldn't believe, and we were meeting. So he told me what he thought about it, or and all this. And so I shared with him my thoughts on it, and and then he thought it was the greatest thing ever. A lot of the times the fans are going to be wrong, but I've actually had an occasion where they were actually right and I wasn't. And so I'll listen to their opinion. I'm very secure in my own skin, even though I've got too much skin, but I'm very secure in my decision making. So I don't mind listening to somebody's opinion and going with my own thoughts or ideas or decisions. So I've actually had a few people suggest things that made a lot of sense that I hadn't thought of. So one of them I'll tell you is, it may sound trivial, was when you're shooting free throws at the end of the game, you take your offensive rebounders off the free throw line and put all 4 of them back. And I know some people are doing that now on a regular basis, but I'm talking about just if you're used to putting them up there and with 30 seconds to go, you pull everybody off. I did that, and our secretary's husband was up in the stands just yelling at me in a fatherly fashion, a very aggressive fatherly fashion. So afterwards, I asked him when he was talking to me. He told me, he said, every time you pull them off the free throw line, you all miss the free throw. He goes, I've been watching you for 2 years, and every time y'all. So I was like, I wonder if he's right. So I had my assistant. I gave my assistant about a week to go back and see if he could figure that out. He goes, you know what? The guy's right. Every time we do that, we miss the free throw. So I thought, okay, well, the next time we'll just stick him up there, and on the shot attempt, we'll tell him to run back after he releases it. And ever since then, that's what we've done. And he knows this, and he thinks he feels very proud of himself because he's made an impact on our program. So just little things like that. But I enjoy that, and if they know that you'll engage with them in a constructive way, it usually turns out pretty well, and it's enjoyable, I think. And I think it's okay to disagree, and I don't think there's a problem with that at all.
That's pretty awesome.
So Kevin, sorry, Matt.
Go ahead.
Kevin, do you ever engage with your fans during the game if they have an opinion?
Rarely.
Okay.
Rarely.
Okay.
I'm my student assistant who just finished playing for us last year was scaring the new players about a week ago, telling them how they've never seen a more intense person coaching a game than myself. So I'm kind of in my little blinders world, like most of us are. But I will sort of document something in my brain, what somebody says, and process it at a later time.
Hey, Coach. Hey, thanks for doing this. My name is Steve Yang. I've got some questions, so bear with me. I'm sitting here listening and writing down my notes. But I like your whole idea about the foul trouble stuff. I think it's a great idea. I myself am a fan of that and endorse it. In regards to keeping your best player in the game with foul trouble and all, have you found it where the opponents have, or even the coach have, it's really messed up their psyche, where they're kind of changes up their game plan, where they're thinking, oh, I've got to get this guy in foul trouble, and all of a sudden they're doing something that they're not used to, and it just changes things up, and it works to your advantage in a sense?
Yeah, I've never thought of that. That's a good point. I'm so into our team and our players performing that I haven't even considered that. So I don't know that I have found that, but I could see where I can tell the other coaches are disappointed when I don't take our player out with foul trouble, mm-hmm. Or they call it foul trouble. I just call it the guy's got 3 fouls, Mm-hmm. I have not noticed that, but that's something that I haven't put a lot of thought to, though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And people don't realize that you can only play basketball 4 fouls. Your 5th foul, you're out of the game. So you really can only play with 4. So no, absolutely. Right. And regarding your subbing strategy, is there someone on your staff? It sounds like you have a coach that kind of handles that. So they have to be on top of that. Like, I mean, the game is pretty quick, so they have to make sure that he's in the game at the right time. Oh, you're doing that, so it's all in your head.
Me.
Okay. Okay.
When you've coached small college basketball for all these years, and you don't get stats every 2 minutes, and you're just going with the flow and going with instinctively. That's just there. It's a you know, there's so many things are going on in all of our heads during a game. You know, so to answer your question, I may tell my assistants what I'm thinking during the game, but rarely. I've only had one or two guys that are nearly as quick to thinking about things like I am on the bench. And in my situations in coaching, I've had very young coaches that they're just trying to get in the business. So they're kind of wet behind the ears. I don't put that onus on them really. I'll tell them to look for a couple things here and there, but basically I kind of look for that. And I sort of know what we consider matchups, like who's going to guard who and why. We pay attention to on our team defensively who we think can guard drivers. If we have a guy that's got length, can he guard long range shooters and sort of take away their shooting pocket with his length and things like that. Mm-hmm. And so when people sub in and out of the game, that's another factor that we're constantly paying attention to because we sub so much that we want to make sure we have the correct matchups. And then we also pay attention to who they've got coming in the game. And if they've got the guy coming in, you can tell is probably not a great player, we may run the exact same set again with the player he's guarding to have the scoring opportunity, the main scoring opportunity, because to their player, that's the first action he's ever seen, even though it might be a repetitive action for us. So we sort of factor in so many of those things during a game. That's what I enjoy about it, actually. That's just, that's why they pay us all those big bucks, I guess.
So, Coach, I spent my first 6 years of coaching on the boys and men's side, and 4 of those 6 years was actually out of any high school on the men's side at Evangel, and worked under a great coach, legendary coach. And one thing that I value about being on the men's side at Evangel is you're playing 2 halves, and it's kind of like a running clock where it's going. You don't have these media timeouts where you've got to be on top of things. And you're saying all that, I agree 100%. And your brain, you've got to be playing chess at all times. And for you to kind of know the subbing patterns, you've got to know your team from 1 through 15, whatever, inside out, and what he or she can bring to the table. But with that being said, if you're putting 5 in, if I'm playing against you and I see your 5 in, wouldn't it or shouldn't it be easier for me to scout you? If I'm sitting there saying, all right, I'm playing coach's team, he's got that 5 in, that 5, we know when they're in, they're doing this offensively and or defensively. So wouldn't it be easier if I'm an opposing coach to scout you?
I'm thinking about that right now. I don't know, but we need a 5 if you've got anybody in mind. Possibly. We're a little bit multiple offensively, so we invert things a lot. So back to that thing, if we do, I don't know, a wing pass and a point guard corner cut and then a ball reversal and then like a shuffle or back screen or something, we may invert all those positions 2 possessions later so that to that defender, that action is brand new to him, even though for our players, they understand it. So to your point, we very easily, and I'm not saying we would, it's kind of like the guy that has the chalk, the last wins, or the guys up the marker board wins, the one that's up there last. So I'm not trying to be that way, but if I felt like that was going on, I could see myself maybe trying to invert something just to have that guy in a different spot and somebody else trying to score, that type of thing. We've also had we've been blessed to have good enough players that, at some point in time, your players have to make a play. It can't be just all scripted out and, it's time to go make a play, get it, just go. And so we've had some players here that have been good enough that they could, even though guarded well, could still score it. So, but I think you've brought up a valid point. I'm going to probably consider, because I haven't thought about that.
And going to your grading, sorry, I'm monopolizing these questions. Sorry. Whenever you're grading people plus and minuses, What's the reward for these kids? Like, what is there a reward? Because
Yeah, I pat them on the back next time I see them. They love it.
Okay.
Or I don't yell at them, and they love that even more.
How about and this two question might be a one question. You can probably merge it together, but do you use like minutes per played, minutes per player played, and also how do you reward the players that are not playing, the 9 through 15 or so?
Now, I don't understand the first part of the question, but I'll come back to that in a minute. But I'm glad you brought that up because we stress the value of what you can bring to our team, and hopefully we're using 9, 10, 11, 12 players, because there's been some seasons we have used that many players. There's been other seasons where the talent level of those guys just wasn't quite good enough, and so they weren't getting time on the floor. But with those players, we do extra individuals with them throughout the whole season. If we know they're not going to get a lot of playing time, we are still working on their player development all the way up to the very end of the season. We are stressing to them the value of them to our team, and they get it, because if their performance in practice is praised or criticized by myself, instantly verbally, and we've had a lot of good players here not get to play 5-on-5 in our practice. You got to be a pretty good player to get into the 5v5 here. So a lot of guys are just hoping they get in that top 10 so they can show us what they have on a regular basis. But we're constantly trying to help their skills develop, and I'm in there with them in the gym myself. So there is a definite in gym rapport with myself and them, and they understand completely why they're number 9 or 12, and that doesn't mean they're unsuccessful at all. We had a guy that averaged 28 points a game in junior college come here and ended up being our 12th or 13th guy on probably the best team I've ever had. It wasn't even our national championship team, and he was a very good player. He didn't do anything wrong. He just splitting hairs on evaluating him. That's just kind of where he fell. And he probably was good enough that he would have been a double-digit scorer if he would have, played enough minutes. So we just constantly stress the value that each player brings to our program, and we value you. And we have knock on wood, we have never really had an issue with the bottom of our roster. Our bottom of our roster has always been very strong emotionally, great effort, has never given up on their season, always knows they can be in there at any point in time. So I think one of the separators that we've had in our conference is that the 2 or 3 guys that go in and play for 3 possessions and come out and sit out for 40 minutes and then come back in and play 2 possessions. Our players that we've had here have been so good at that, and I usually go crazy on the praise of that because of how difficult that is to do. And we've had players here that have been very effective doing that, and their careers have grown and blossomed into something else because they proved they could do that at some stage of their career, which none of these players prior to coming here ever had to do that. Obviously, we all know they all played the whole game type of thing. Mm-hmm. But what was the first part of your question about the minutes per play?
Yeah. So do you do the reward part, the whole plus and minus in regards to minutes played? Because a kid could play, you're talking about it earlier, just playing 5 minutes to 25 minutes, and if I would have played more, I would have gotten more pluses or whatnot. Do you take that into consideration?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Well, I think there's a balance with that on his ability and skill and our expectation of him. The burdens of leadership are great. One of them is to be unpopular when necessary. So I don't mind being unpopular if I need to be. I'd rather be popular. But the point of that is if you only play 6 minutes and do really well, and the next game you only play 3 minutes, we're going to expect you to still do really, really well. And the extra possessions or minutes per game will take care of themselves in time. But I don't really rate it out on 40 minutes on a 40-minute. I don't calculate it out to 40 minutes per necessarily. I just look at it for what it's worth. They played 8 possessions and 7 of them they really helped us. That kind of thing.
Thank you. Appreciate it, man.
Hey,
I'm
Coach,
disappointed. I know I'm disappointing everybody on the quantifying of the grading of possessions, because I've had everybody ask me for templates on, and I'm ashamed to say that I've never thought about that. I just simply go down and watch every possession, and I've done it for so long I can do it very quickly, and I just do it my own little chicken scratch, and I understand it. And but I thought to myself, maybe I should come up with some fancy template. I wouldn't know what to do with myself if I did, but it works for me, and that's the most important thing, is figure out what works for you. And if you adapted some of these things I'm talking about, it would probably, you might have your own way of doing things that are more effective than what I'm doing, of course. And that's the idea of listening to all these kind of things that we're talking about.
Maybe we can get synergy on it.
Well, synergy is misleading as well. They had us. We don't run any side out of bounds plays anymore. Not really. Last year we didn't. We just got it in and ran our own stuff, and we were ranked a certain thing based on out of bounds. And I thought, well, we never even ran a play. How could we be ranked that high? So, all these statistics and everything can be steered a certain direction if you're not careful, of understanding what you're really looking at. I think our game is statted so poorly. It just doesn't tell us anything. I don't think. I mean, it doesn't tell us anything. If Draymond Green set Klay Thompson 6 monster screens and got him open, and he doesn't get any point credit for those, he gets no statistical category shows how good he was on those types of plays. That's just weird to me. Of course, we all have heard about the hockey assist thing, and I agree with that too. And the thing that, if we send 4 offensive rebounders to the glass on every shot, and if I send a 5'10" player in from 22 feet out, he takes off running on a shot attempt, and their 6'9" guy slides over just for half a second to block him out, and if somebody else gets the offensive rebound on our team, it seems like the 5'10" guy should have maybe get credit for part of that rebound, but we don't give him credit for it on our stats. So I don't understand how our game is statted.
I got a question here from Coach Kevin Mitchell. He says, do you speak to your scoring system during your recruitment process, and has it been a deterrent with prospective recruits?
It's never really come up. And if you're a good player, it shouldn't be a deterrent, because you'll be on the floor a lot for us. Gerard Newby probably played 35 minutes a game. He was in great physical condition. He was the defensive player of the year in our conference. Ended up being a pretty good offensive player and became a first-team All-American. I don't really get that detailed about that kind of thing, because my hopes are that all of our players are complete players, and that I'm not only can I play 10 or 11 or 12 players, but I actually want to play that many. Did that answer that question? I don't know if it did or not.
Yeah, I think so.
Hey, Coach, I got a question for you. This is the real Jason Pruitt, not the one you had. Hey, so I was on I'm from that area. I'm from Alabama originally. So I was on a 32-5 team as a sophomore that lost the national championship. So I was looking at your records, and you've been about that successful. So do you think when you're recruiting these young men that, like on the team that I was on, the coach didn't have to police us. We policed ourselves. I'm looking at your roster and some of the people on there. Is that what you kind of have going on there now, that the players police themselves and you're like the last call if they need something or you have to step in?
I think it's mutual, but I think what part of what you're saying is prevalent. We've got really nice kids, and in practices, if you're not in the active play, we have you standing on the out of bounds line or in the shaded part of the out of bounds line, and you're verbally engaged the entire time, that type of thing. And I just told our newcomers, I just had a meeting with our newcomers the other day, and I said, you're at a place that is ultra competitive. We expect you to be ultra competitive. You're also at a place that if you're guarding someone and you get the best of them, and while you guard them, when the play's over, if you realize, if you know they didn't run to the right spot, we expect you to tell them where they should have gone, so that we're all constantly helping each other. So I think that I've had some high school coaches and things come to our practice, and they've said they've never heard more talking during a practice than our practice. And I tell them I don't want it to be like a library. I want, plus the guys on the sideline, if they say something dumb, you can catch that and go, well, no, why'd you tell him that? And then you can filter through and we can all get on the same page sooner than later, hopefully, because they will say some dumb stuff. If you're going to allow them to talk, which we do, then there's going to be some things said that don't really line up or make sense, but which is fine. That's we like stopping and dialoguing about some things. We've actually had players Jason, to talk. We have this matchup zone thing that is unique to ourselves, that our players actually have altered and modified some of the rules in it because they think it's more effective if we did it this way rather than the other way. And I think they were right, by the way. Of course, I have the right to veto anything they want to do, of course. But those kind of things to me are just really neat because they're not doing it to get the easy way out. They're doing it because they want to win.
So when you recruit these kids that you have, so because of your past success and your current success, so you're saying they really don't care about the offensive and defensive style. They just want to be a part of the program?
In my experiences, they might ask me, well, what's your offense like? And what's your defense like? And I ask my players all the time, how would you answer that? And they all start laughing because we're so multiple in both areas, it depends on the situation. And please, I hope I take this with a grain of salt, but somebody asked me about our system of play, and because of how the game has moved in the last 6, 7, 8 years, there'll be one night we pack line it, and the other night we're denying everything and pressuring like crazy, and another night we're zoning it, another night we're pressing it. Now we work on it very hard, but we're a team that has a few fundamental ideas that we instill, and then we try to line ourselves up properly for that opponent. We had a post player several years ago that was like the Shaquille O'Neal of our conference. If he got deep position, he was just a monster. And so we constantly were working on getting him deep post ups and getting him off the block and running him to the rim, getting ball reversals so he could step in from the opposite block and get 2 feet in the paint type stuff. And then the very next post player the following year that was good for us was horrible at that. He couldn't score because he was a little bit undersized. He wanted the ball a step and a half off the block. He wanted to back in one dribble and then make some sort of spin move. And the first guy was like 71% from the floor, he was a top field goal percentage shooter in the country at every level. And the other guy was about a 60%er. So we had to modify things for each of those guys based on the skill set, of course. So, but they don't really get real specific. They just know we've had good players and we've had success, and and that we're going to try our best to line them up the right way based on our skill sets.
So you just have ball players. You have positionless players. You just want ball players. They can do everything.
You know, you said that word. My players from 20 years ago they tell me we should all get together and sue basketball, because we were using that word back in the late 90s, early 2000s, that word positionless. And then all of a sudden, like in, I don't know what year it was, like 2009 or 10 or 11, you start hearing it a little bit, and now it's all over the place. And my players say that we coined that phrase. I don't know if it's true or not, but to answer your question, we don't really assign positions. No, we don't really get into that. We never have.
Well, I'm sitting here watching Kemba Walker now. So
I am too.
Was
I
2001.
can't believe you're actually listening to me when the Celtics are on right now.
And back then, when I was at these pro combines, they were like, "Man, we really like you, but we don't want a combo guard." But now all you see are combo guards. So maybe I was
Right.
a generation too early.
I get it. Now, how do you know the Jason Pruitt I had?
Well, we actually relatives.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, but they're originally from Alabama. His family's
I
originally
didn't know
from
that.
Alabama. Yeah, but I had a coach call me maybe, I want to say 16, 17, and you were playing them in the first round of the NAIA tournament. And he was like, "Hey, I see they got this kid named Jason Pruitt on their roster. You know anything about him?" And I said, "Yeah, he'll light you up at 50 if it get hot."
That's true. That's true.
Yeah. Thanks for answering my questions.
What's that?
I said, "Thanks for answering my questions."
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Any other coaches with questions? Coach Burton, you thank you so much, man. This is so fascinating. Your philosophy and
Now, Coach Smith, is fascinating your cryptic word for confusing and disappointing?
no, you know, I'm gonna try to think about how to put this, but there's certain coaches you meet that just think outside the box and do things their own way, and they've learned through experience, and that is the most powerful teacher most of the time, rather than learning from someone. But you learn through experience, and you've kind of honed your own philosophy, and it's just got so much we can learn from. And there's so many coaches that that unfortunately don't have the opportunity to come on and listen to you, but
But let's think about my philosophy. I've joked around with it that I want my best players on the floor the most times I can have them out there. So that's basically what it is. I want to have, the best players on the floor for that situation. It seems like that's what all of us should do, but sometimes we sort of get lost in the shuffle with different things and hopefully you've got 9 really good players that it doesn't matter. They're all very similar in efficiency, but that's sort of, I didn't realize it was, people were so curious about how we did things, but here in the last couple of years, of course, that's what happens when you win games. I know. I find it funny when I have Chamber of Commerce's want me to come talk to them about success just because we can win some ball games. They want me to tell them how to run their companies. So I ask them what position on the payroll am I going to be on? But but I appreciate you all being curious about us, and I don't think that we've cornered the market or by any stretch. And I'm super curious on how to do what we do even better. And that quantifying thing, I have really put a lot of thought to it, and I'm going to try to see if I can make that a scientific template type thing that shows it better instead of me just being able to understand it myself. And that's a difficult thing to get to.
Hey, Coach, I just want to add, like, what you do, it's what Matthew's saying, it's really fascinating. But, I believe basketball is kind of like a religion. If you really truly believe it, I don't practice it. I know there's different religions out there. If you believe in it, it's that, right? So if you have the horses too, it helps out as well too. But I think any team that's efficient in what they do and what they believe in, it's going to win the game. And I truly believe that a kid, like you're saying, your best 5, even if he's tired, his 50% may be better than your six man's 100% or six man's 80%. And I think that's really important too. And momentum plays a big part, and just IQ. I mean, just being there, you're only playing with 94 feet or so. And so if you're in the right position, you can make a play already. And then being in the right position is knowing where to be at. And if you have that smart kid that knows, and even though he's 50% tired, fatigued, but the other kid doesn't know where to be at, I think that plays a big part. So I totally agree. I mean, there's a lot of coaches out there like yourself with unique systems and how they do things. There's a method to your madness. And I think about the coach at, was it Grinnell? Is it Grimmel that just plays really 4-on-5?
Arsenault is his name, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I think of him too. Got coaches like that. But no, I appreciate your strategy and you coming out here and sharing with us how you.
I'm glad to be here. And Coach Smith, I got to tell you, a year or 2 years ago, I was flown to Idaho to talk to a bunch of Division I coaches and high school coaches about zone offense, because the guy that brought me out said he thought our zone O's were about as effective as he's seen before. We essentially screen the zone a lot and do some things to get them to run out of men, that kind of thing. And anyway, and so I go out and fly out there, do the thing, come back. It was that season, our first 12 games, we were probably the worst zone offensive team in the country. So hopefully we buck the trend on this and we don't start the season 2-10 or anything of that nature. But I always enjoy talking basketball. I'm always scared I'm going to screw people up if they listen to me.
No, I mean, there's some concepts that I think you take a step farther. But like every time there's a dead ball, there's no reason why a coach shouldn't be thinking what 5 players are going to give me the best chance in the next possession, right? Especially when you're going baseline out of bounds. I mean, that's a no-brainer. You should have your best 5 to score on that possession baseline out of bounds. But how many coaches really substitute for that possession? You know, it's very few. But I just love it. I love your way of thinking. And it, if you put it down in plain terms, it's like, yeah, that kind of is obvious, but how many coaches actually do that? They play for the next possession. I just really, I love it. I really do. And I obviously the proof's in the pudding. I mean, you've dominated for the last, 10, 12, 15 years. And people are starting to ask why. So I think I've got some questions here in the let's see here. Oh, Danelle Bishop from Cal Poly Pomona wants you to come back on and go over your matchup zone. And then Pierre Miller asks the best way to get in contact with you.
Sure, you can give them my contact info.
Okay.
That's not a problem.
Yep. Perfect. I'll put it right here.
If they don't reach me, tell them don't be afraid to email or call 3 times. I don't have voicemail. I'm a pen and pad kind of guy. So, but I'd be glad to talk to anyone. I'll say this too. Our matchup zone is, I don't call it a matchup zone. I guess with our players, I won't let them call it a zone. We just call it our fist defense, but it's essentially a matchup zone. But I'd be glad to go over that whenever that time is appropriate. At another time, I want to watch the Celtics see if they can win.
Yeah, we'll let you get over there and pay attention to that game, Coach. But I want to thank you so much for coming on, and I know there's a million other things going on, especially when you're running your own program. So thank you so much for spending time with us and sharing. I really, really appreciate it. And I'm sure everyone that was on here learned a ton.
Thank you.
And
just don't let me screw you up, but I enjoyed it.
No, thank you so much, Coach Burton.
All right. Have a good night.
All right, I appreciate it.